In this lesson, we will learn how to make any image a deep image. So now that we've learned quite a bit about deep compositing, you might want to take any image, say for example, some stock footage that you have in your library, and use it in deep compositing. And when I say stock footage, I mean stock elements, things like explosions, fire, sparks, smoke, fog. So what I've done is I've rendered some CG fog, ground fog, for our Grollo scene. You take a look at it. This is the element, and of course, the first thing you'll notice is story of a compositor's life. It's not a very good CG element. So this is from RenderMan. Gone through and done the same setup that I showed you in the RenderMan lesson. One thing I want to point out is that this is a volume render. This is actually volumetric. It's not geometric. If I show you the deep samples, for instance, at this particular pixel, we have an astounding 603 samples just at this one pixel. And if I move around, you can see there's over 500, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of samples on every pixel. What this means is that this render, this deep render, takes up a huge amount of storage space. Huge. I've rendered it 1/4 size, but the full size was over 6 gigs. 6 gigabytes for a single frame. Let's take a look at how this actually looks in our composite. Enable this deep merge. So here you can see that it quite beautifully actually integrates into the scene. Unfortunately, it's not really the element we want. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. Let's say we've gone into our elements library and we've found this perfect fog element. In this case, it's just some noise that I'm generating procedurally here in Nuke with a noise node. Default settings. And we have a few options here if we want to make this deep. And these are the same things you do for any image. We've got 2 nodes that Nuke gives you, deep from frames and deep from image. Let me plug this in. Deep from image. So this is what we get. Make the viewer a little bit bigger for you. Open up the properties panel, deep from image. We don't have very many options here. So in this case, by default, this is unchecked. So it goes all the way in the background. Not a particularly useful thing for us. Specify Z. So now I have a distance from camera that I can set. I move this up and down. We can see that it changes where the plane is in the scene, but it's just that. It's just a plane. So for something like atmospherics and fog in particular, this wouldn't work. You wouldn't believe this is fog, obviously. Fog completely envelops everything smoothly. So as a tool, deep from image is not going to be suitable for this particular task. Let's try deep from frames. So this looks much better. We can see that there's more atmosphere in the background and less as we move forward in space towards the camera. If we look at the settings, it gives us quite a few more settings. So in this, what's really interesting for our atmospherics here is that it gives Z-min and Z-max. So the min-max would be the density and distance from camera. As I take this, say move this around a little bit, the min. Let's make it 100, or just maybe 75. So now it's gotten closer to the camera, and we can see that there's now more density in front of the character. Take it all the way down to, say, 1. You can see now it's looking pretty two-dimensional because we've just got everything up front over the character. There's nothing really coming out of it. Let's go back to 175. See now it recedes much better. Let's go with the max. Let's just look at 500 instead of 5,000. So here immediately, much more dense in the midground, but still not going in front of the character, and certainly not going into the extreme foreground here. So you can see this is adding much more flexibility for our atmospherics. And using stock elements is something that's really common in a deep compositing shot because it is so easy to integrate something like this with atmosphere. It's something that we did all the time on Godzilla and Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's something that we used in almost every single shot. Let me just hit this up to 1,000. I'll just push this back to 5,000 just so you can see the different looks that we get. Here we go. So something that's popular is a tool that I've heard called Deep Extrude. What Deep Extrude is, just plug it in, you can see we get the same result with these settings, is sort of a simplification, at least from the user's perspective, of what Deep from Frames does. You're not concerned with how many frames you're trying to extrapolate depth from or anything like that. It's really you just plug in your stock image, say how far away you want the plane to be from the camera, and then how much you want to have it fall off, which is blend. The blend essentially, if you think about it in 3D space, there is a plane or a card being projected in the camera's frustum, and then its maximum density at that distance, in this case 175 units, and it just falls off to become more and more transparent. In this case, at a distance of 5,000 units, it becomes completely transparent. So it's a really simple way to do atmosphere. For instance, if I just bring these down, you can see blends less and less. If I move this to 75, the plane moves forward, and now it's coming past the most foreground plants in our shot. Set this back to where it was. I'm going to include this with the project files so that you can take advantage of this. I'm going to show you inside this group. It's actually really simple. Just take deep from image, and then we just use a couple deep expression nodes to just create a few knobs, and they just give us some additional controls that don't really exist by default to give us that extra usability. This is what I usually use. This is what a lot of my colleagues use. It's just a much more user-friendly way to convert something into deep. And something I should point out about things that have been converted to deep like this is that they are not equivalent to something that has been natively rendered in deep, something from a CG rendering engine or from the scanline render node. This is not as accurate. There's fewer samples, and it's not as good. It's not something that's sophisticated. So if we were to convert the character just a 2D image of the character, we wouldn't have all of the contours and shape of the character in the deep volume. It would just be a 2D image that then is just stretched out evenly towards the camera. So really, converting images to deep is much more successful when you have something that requires a very even amount of depth, something like atmosphere, which is why it's very popular for atmosphere. I'm going to go ahead and integrate this into our shot setup and make a holdout and then show you what that looks like. We have now reached the end of the lesson. We learned how to convert regular images into deep images. In the next lesson, we will learn how to merge converted deep images with native deep images.